just get straight into the questions. Can you just give me your perspective on what you kind of learned today, from what you've been hearing from enterprises and some of the tech firms, and what do you think the state of AI is right now?
Yeah, well, I'll start by thanking you, Phil, and your team, because this has been a really great day and a half, or last night. The event last night was fantastic, and the content today and the sessions have been really good. So thank you for hosting us, and thank you for having all of us here. Beautiful, beautiful place as well. I think for me, starting with how you began the day, and the HFS point of view, and then hearing from panelist after panelist, it sort of reinforced, I think, much of what we're seeing out there right now. I think, first of all, I talk to CEOs and their C-suites all the time, but we have data to sort of back it up. Our most recent data says, every enterprise, regardless of what industry they're in, is going through some level of reinvention. In fact, 92% of the C-suite that we've recently surveyed say that they all need to reinvent, regardless of where they come from, industry, market, whatever. 92% of them are telling us they need to reinvent. And in our world, we believe all reinvention strategies lead through technology. And Gen AI, of course, is a great catalyst. That same group of executives, 81% of them tell us that they think Gen AI is an opportunity really to drive that reinvention. And so for me, a lot of what we've heard in the examples, a lot of what we've seen in the presentations and the data has sort of reinforced that we're at one of these exciting inflection points that all of us will maybe see just a couple of times, in our various careers, where we can take advantage of something, to really drive change across whatever industry we're in.
Yeah, because our research has shown nearly 50% of tech investment decisions are now made outside of tech.
Yeah.
And the common thread I'm picking up is the companies who are not making progress with Gen AI are those who are still persisting with these silos. Tech does their thing, business does their own, never the twain shall meet. How have you overcome that at Accenture? You've announced $1 billion plus in Gen AI business. You seem to be running fast from the forefront with this. How have you been overcoming these silos within your enterprises, and what's working for you?
Yeah, it is a constant struggle, but to your point, fully half of the technology decisions now and the budgets are being made and controlled outside of the IT organization. And many of the dependencies to get the return on these technology investments, those dependencies sit outside the technology organization. We just did our earnings this afternoon, so I can share real data with you that was probably still private as of this morning. But to your point, for our fiscal year, which just ended a few weeks ago, we did $3 billion in Gen AI sales in this past year. And that number is big and small because we did 80 billion or whatever in sales. So 3 billion is whatever, it's a small percentage. But last year we did 900 million in sales. And so, to see a 3x growth in the year and that 900 million, Gen AI was the fastest technology to $1 billion in the history of our organization. That isn't being procured by the IT organizations. That's being procured in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of projects that happen across the enterprise. And so we're absolutely seeing, beyond just proof of concepts, we're seeing projects happen across the enterprise. And it is our job, to sort of bring together now different functional areas or different, parts of the organization to make them work together. And candidly, those silos exist, and it's difficult to do it.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is data. And how do you help companies create a meaningful data infrastructure to make AI possible? Are you having to go back to the drawing board with clients?
Yeah. I mean, data. If you just look at that same number I gave you, that 3 billion in sales this year translated to close to $1 billion in revenue. Almost, I can't give you the exact numbers, but almost every one of those pure Gen AI projects resulted in some sort of data project pull through, because we don't double count. And so you can look at the data project pull through, and almost every one of those projects resulted in some sort of data project that needed to be done. I think we've heard a lot about data today, but it's quite simple, right? This is the core of what we do with our clients, and it starts with really building the digital core, and that starts with, are you in the cloud to begin with? And while you can pick which stat you like, somewhere between 30 to 50 to 60% of workloads, depending on who you believe, are in the cloud. There's still a large percentage of those workloads that are not in the cloud, and those that are in the cloud, only a small fraction of them are truly modernized. Wow. And so, getting that digital core in place, establishing that data structure, then securing that data and securing that digital core really are the foundational elements to be able to take advantage of much of what we've talked about today.
Right, so you find it's going back to the core to get to the next rather than doing everything concurrently?
Yeah, I mean, you can do these things at a much faster pace, and you can do them in a way you can do them concurrently, but you cannot skip the hard work, the foundational work to get the true benefits out of this capability.
Sure. Okay. So you saw us talk earlier about this shift towards it's like agentic AI.
Yeah.
And then even beyond that, we're calling services as software right now, or software. How real is this from your perspective? And we're talking about 2030 as kind of when we see this really taking place. But
agentic is here. It's on our doorstep. I actually liked. I'll digress for a second. Our stuff lines up very well all the time. You guys do your research and you publish your stuff, and we do ours, and then we sort of compare it. And 9 out of 10 times we're seeing very similar things. You talked about this morning the what, the why, and the how, right? We sort of looked at 23 as experimentation, 24 as production, and 25 as scale. Yeah. And agentic actually really provides, we think, for the first time, true opportunity to scale, because you're actually doing something fundamentally different now with agentic. It isn't just automation. It isn't just more efficiency. It's actually being able to use the technology to work with the technology to create very dynamic business processes. But to sort of get back to the point about you can't skip the basics, you can't skip the foundational stuff. We'll release a piece of research in the next couple of weeks, and it builds on our research from last year. And we've got we look at the maturity of all of these capabilities inside organizations to look at who's going to be able to really take advantage of generative AI capabilities. And we've got like any good consultant, we've got sort of a framework, and it's a maturity model, and it scores enterprises on a number of factors, but 4 principally. And you guys have talked about them with different language today. It's your process maturity, it's your data and your tech maturity, it's business and IT coming together, and it's the talent you have. And where you score on those sort of puts you on the maturity curve of how ready you are, what we call reinvention ready. And last year when we did this survey, 9% of the enterprises that we surveyed were reinvention ready. They were sort of the most mature and therefore could get the most value and the benefit out of Gen AI. This year, 9% has turned into 16. And so you can see that the hard work has been done by a number of companies over the past year to get there. And those companies, as they're now deploying these capabilities, are getting benefits. And in fact, what you see in those 16% is they get 2.5% greater revenue growth than their peer set, and they get 2.4% greater productivity than their peer set.
So if you had to put your finger on it, because we've seen only about 5% are getting this at scale right now.
Yeah.
What are they doing to get beyond this POC nightmare and actually get to this point? What is it that they're doing internally that is really making it work for them?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. Number one, they're looking at processes end to end. So, and they're looking at experiences end to end. So, you take a sort of traditional HR process of hiring and onboarding, and then you look at a traditional HR process of offboarding as someone leaves the organization. All the things that happen in between that are touched by the finance organization and maybe the sales organization. Well, those companies that are getting it right are looking at what is my hire to retire end-to-end value stream or process look like? How does it cut across all of these functions, bringing all those functions together, connecting those systems, using one common set of data, democratizing the data so everybody's sort of looking at the same thing. And now they're able to apply AI, or Gen AI in this case, but they're applying it across the entire process instead of effectively breaking down the silos, has been a really effective way to do it. The second thing, maybe it'll sound very basic, but is we've heard a lot of examples today, is the real focus on business value and business outcomes, and moving away from some of the more traditional metrics, that we usually measure when we implement technology, and focusing much more with the governance and the MBOs and everything else on the business outcomes and the value that's being created. And then, another great example I thought we heard multiple times today is looking at it much more than just cost. Like every aspect of the income statement, in some cases the balance sheet, looking at these things for growth, looking at them for cost. You mentioned you got to look at productivity beyond just cost, and they've sort of indoctrinated a culture and a measurement system to do that successfully.
Right. So I'm going to give you one more question. And obviously you've been elevated to the head of communications, media and technology for Accenture globally. Congratulations. How are you going to take what you've learned from fixing operations and driving Gen AI to operations into an industry which is struggling, is being disrupted?
It's first of all, the industry in and of itself is filled with sub-industries. So if you look at the traditional telcos or the communication service providers, that's an industry that's been challenged and certainly needs to be continuously disrupted. We have media sitting in there too, which is actually quite different. But then we've got the high tech companies sitting in there. You've got the legacy high tech companies, which require some disruption. But you've also got all of the companies, the semiconductors and everybody else, who are fueling and creating this next economy and all this generative AI. And then you got the software and platform companies out there, which are in and of themselves pretty innovative. And so step one is sort of breaking down those. But I find it to be extremely exciting because many of these companies are involved in some aspect of everything that we've talked about, today, whether they're providing the infrastructure for the data to run over it, or they're providing the tooling or the capabilities or the software. Many of them tend to hire some of the best thinkers in this space. And so I'm very much looking forward to it because I think it's going to be as much disruption as it's going to be about partnering with some of these companies that are really creating what this next wave of technology is going to look like, and figuring out how we bring it, to everybody else.
Terrific. Well, it's been great just having you share some of your thoughts. It's been a breath of fresh air. Thinking about end-to-end process just sort of brings it back home. So I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Phil.
I know you're going to hurry to the airport. So.
Thank you very much.